So the two people presenting, myself, Jonathan Hassell, I'm the Hassell, or at least the first Hassell behind Hassell Inclusion. My wife is my fellow director and I'm CEO. And I'm going to be kind of starting off today and just making sure that everything's working well in terms of the chat. But most of the great content you're going to be getting is going to be coming to you from Pete Bricknell. One of the great things about Hassell Inclusion, I think one of the things that makes us very different from a lot of accessibility organizations is we tend to kind of think about things in a kind of strategic way. That's, my background and specialism. Pete takes it to a whole other level. He has a management background and he's done these sorts of things for kind of like large organizations. So the whole management consultancy view of things, not just how to make sure that you've got a good accessible product, but his specialism is very much around product management and around making sure that businesses are actually getting the right advice for them to thrive. And that's the sort of thing that is going to be, if you like, the golden nugget for today. That combination of, if you like, the accessibility knowledge in my head and a number of the people on the call's heads, but also Pete's ability, if you like, to enable you to think business, because that is the way that you're going to get what you want when it comes to this month's topic, which is all about how to get my boss to buy in. Accessibility isn't free. This is actually some stuff that we did a survey earlier in the year. What would people like us to do these webinars on? This was a key thing that came through, the actual kind of words. There's no magic make it accessible button. Making your products and content accessible can take time and money. So how do I get people on side? That was what people were asking us. So here we are, hints and tips to enable you to do that. So what we're going to be looking at is benefits and buy-in and budget and how we pull all of that together to enable you to really get this stuff done in a really great way. And we just wanted to start out by just making you feel like if you relate to this topic, if you feel like, you're never ever getting the right kind of buy-in from the people above you, that they're always asking you either annoying or difficult questions about why to do this. You are really not alone, not just the other people on this call who are interested in what we've got to say, but the reason we have something to say is we have been asked these questions, for me, almost 20 years worth of questions. So, it's things like, well, can we just do that later? Or we don't really have the time or the budget. This isn't what matters at the moment. It costs too much. Or the kind of disempowered questions, like when we kind of say to people, okay, so you'd really like to do some great stuff in accessibility, we can help you. What sort of budget do you have? And they kind of say, well, actually, I've no idea how to get budget at all. And I don't hold any budget myself, and I don't even know the people who do. And it's kind of like, okay, well, to make something happen in organizations, normally you either need to get a budget holder behind you or a lot of people behind you. So how do we help you get all of these? Some questions coming through already. That's brilliant. Thanks, Philip. Keep on asking those questions in the chat. We'll be with you very shortly on those. But I wanted to start out by doing just a quick Slido to get to know people on the call a little bit better. I don't know if you've used Slido before. We tend to use these quite a lot in our webinars. So if you go to sli.do or slido.com in your browser, you'll see a screen like this, and in this particular box here, joining as a participant, if you put in 30071, just happens to be the international standard that we created, if you type that into there, you will find yourself at a very, very simple question, which is, where are you on your accessibility journey? So are you mostly unaware of this? You've got a vague idea of accessibility, but don't know very much at all. Aware, you know about it, but you're not really doing anything. Then normally the next place that people go is testing. So I'm testing a product. The next place, hopefully, is fixing a product. A lot of people get stuck on testing rather than fixing. Embedding is the stage after that, really, which is how do we get it right from the start rather than having to fix it? And then maintaining this. We are brilliant at this already. And so actually, it's about making sure we keep up our good level. So 20 of you have already come into this. And so what we can see here on the screen saying, if I just get rid of what Microsoft wants to say, is, yeah, so around about 2% of people on the call so far are aware. 30% are actually in embedding, which is great. So, I mean, that proves that you have already been, if you like, following us with us on the right way of doing this. It's not just about the testing or the fixing. It's actually about really getting good at it. And actually, that's probably why you're on the call, because that's the thing that generally tends to take either money or a lot of persuasion of the people around you to come with you on that embedding journey. You're not just fixing a tool anymore. It is a harder thing to do to get the processes right in your organization. And so, yeah, so a lot of people at that stage, well, thank you so much. That just gives us an idea of where you're at and the sort of questions that you might have. So before we go into this, I wanted to give you some encouragement. So I wanted to give you 3 stories of how actually thinking about how to get buy-in in the right sort of way can really get you places. And these are from different places in the maturity journey of a number of organizations. On the left, I'm not going to name the companies, but this was a small charity who wanted to work with us. They were actually a disability charity, so they knew that this was massively important. For them, the benefits were kind of obvious. The spend was essential because as a disability charity, they had to make their website accessible. It would have been embarrassing otherwise. But the key thing was that they knew why to do this, but their embarrassment that they needed to get over was they didn't know how to do this, and they didn't know how to do this in an efficient way. And what we were able to do was to take them on a journey to empower them. So to take, if you like, their why and make it into, we now are able to do this as an organization. So if you come out of this and you've got a better why, as I say, we can help you on your journey. In the middle, an organization that's actually quite a large IT agency. They've been actually working on accessibility for probably 10 years plus now. And actually we're working with them at the moment because they've got to a certain level. And they've, like a lot of organizations out there, because of things like the Valuable 500, are now making more and more public commitments to disabilities specifically. And they know that they're doing some things right, but they know that there's so much more that they can do. And so what we did with them was we went through a whole benefits exercise, a big workshop with almost sort of 30 people from throughout the agency, saying, okay, why is this going to be a real win? Why is this going to be the best thing that you could do as a company for your bottom line this year? And so it's not just about how do we make sure that we are living up to the commitments that we make in public, but actually how do we take it from there to actually living up to those commitments, being a way for our organization to thrive and to win going forwards. And some really, really interesting stuff coming out of there. For example, they are massively keen on getting a diverse workforce because they really understand that when you have a diversity of thought in an organization, it tends to be a lot more creative and a lot more innovative. The challenge they have is how do they attract people with various different types of diversity, including disability to them. And if they do have people who have a disability in the firm, then what do they need to do to make sure that those people can actually thrive as part of the company? So we're taking them to a whole new level with where they're at after 10 years. The massive multinational on the right, this is a company that we've been working with for 8 years. And just simply, we've been doing amazing stuff with them as their strategic partner in helping them work out what they should be doing. But up until earlier this year, we didn't start doing competitor analysis for them. We didn't start saying, actually, how well are you doing in comparison to your competitors? How well are you doing funding this stuff in comparison to your competitors? And what we were able to do was to double the budget spent on accessibility, which was pretty large already for that organization overnight, just by asking the right questions and doing the right analysis to see how well they were doing, how many people they had working on accessibility in comparison to their competitors. And suddenly the people at the top of the organization saw that the people doing accessibility were playing an absolute blinder. They were doing amazing work, but the results they were getting were amazing for the size of the team that they were, which was very small. And when we compared the size of their team to one of the other companies in their space, the other company's team was 10 times bigger. And suddenly the people at the top thought, actually, we thought we were funding this really well. We're not. There's much more for us to do. So just these are the sorts of things that we're trying to get you to think about. So what we're going to be looking at today is the sort of things that come out of our scorecard. So our scorecard to enable organizations to see how mature they are in accessibility is a really good way of finding out how well you're doing. And what we're finding is that a lot of people come back with a really high score on motivation. They know that they really want to do this. They may know some of the benefits, but very low scores from the kind of stakeholders. So, the person filling it in, the person who's really passionate about accessibility really knows why this is so important, but the people above them who have the budget don't. So how do we make that work for them? That's what today is all about. And how to make sure that from there it flows into action. So into policies and practices and these sorts of things. And then finally at the end, a lot of organizations kind of think that accessibility is just a cost to them without really thinking that this can be a massive benefit that they can be measuring and return on investment. So that's the sort of stuff we're about today. We're trying to help you with this stuff right here at the bottom, especially the low scores on buy-in, to try and help you get into a place where you can really have the resources, the time needed to be able to be thinking about how to embed this really well. So we're going to be looking at 4 steps. We're going to be looking at benefits, buy-in, budget, and getting it done. And I'm just going to give you sketch in a few benefits, and then I'm going to hand over to Pete for the rest of the session. We don't want to spend too long on this today because even though there is a huge amount here, we used to run 3-hour workshops on this, for example, this is the place where most of you are doing okay. So we want to move on to the rest. But just to give you an idea, there are financial benefits. So it's 40% of users, for example, who may need this if they have a disability or they're older, especially because of COVID. Lots of people who weren't using digital technologies now are completely dependent on them until we can go out there completely freely. So it's really important to be servicing all of those people. The costs of servicing people is much lower online than it is if you're using a call center or something like that. So actually the more people, if you're an organization with lots of customers, the more people, more of those customers you can get online because you've got an accessible way of doing that, the better. Ethical reasons. Most organizations are really obsessed with diversity and inclusion at the moment, possibly because of Black Lives Matter. Disability plays into that space as well, probably because of Valuable 500, who've done an amazing job signing up 500 of the biggest companies in the world to say we really care about this. The reason they're all doing that, what's in it for them other than just good PR, is that what I was saying earlier, diverse organizations are more creative. So how to make sure that your organization is able to do that well, that plays out in accessibility. There's obviously legal reasons for doing all of this. Yes, you can get sued, 2,700 new lawsuits every year, that sort of thing. Yes, you can get blackmailed. You may get an email any moment saying, I'm a lawyer, your website isn't accessible, pay me £50,000 and I'll go away. That's happening all of the time. Unfortunately, we do not condone that at all. We're the people who help organizations push against those lawyers because they're not on the side of the angels, if you like. They're not trying to get accessibility working. They're trying to make money, and that's not what we're into. The real costs, though, are when reputational, if you get this sort of stuff wrong. And innovation. If you do this well, then thinking different is just part of your organization, and you can get amazing things coming out of that. So that just gives you an idea of some of these things. If you want more on this, this. Pete will mention some resources that we've got later. But I want to hand over to him now for the next step of this. He's going to be looking at buy-in. So Pete, I'll let you take over the screen. Over to you.
So there's a guy called John Cotter, an academic out in the States, who talks about 8 steps for business change. And this really is a helpful way of thinking about how do you build a guiding coalition, how do you build support for an idea. This is relevant for any kind of change program, any kind of project that you're doing. And part of this is, one, it doesn't really matter where you are in the organization. You are capable of doing this. You're capable of finding the right allies by sharing a vision, by making it matter to the person who has resources and being a vanguard of that success. Stick your mitt up and say, I'd like to be the pilot for this, or let me show you how it's done. And there are some steps, there's some tools in getting there. One of them is creating the sense of urgency. The benefits workshop that we run, or looking at those benefits, is a great way of working out what's relevant for your organization or what's relevant now. Choosing who's in your guiding coalition. Where I've seen people successful is they've found a mentor who can take them through the politics of the organization, help them work out who's the right person to have the discussion with, who's the right person to present. Because the more senior you go up the organization, the more abilities they can choose to do budget, and they can tell people what to do. But if they've got a good vision, and you've got an idea of where you want to head, then it makes it much, much easier for them to say, yeah, I want to go and do that. And around you, there's loads and loads of people who could be on your side, and probably are on your side if you had created that momentum. And behind that is thinking about what can remove barriers. How can you get training done very easily? How can you get things out onto projects, make it easier for people? So for example, some of our clients say, well, we do lots of different technology projects. If we have a central team who've solved the problems around accessibility on forms and screens and the components of a website, then all you need to do is go and grab from that central resource, and you're probably pretty much in the right direction, rather than having to reinvent the wheel all the time. So it's thinking imaginatively of how can we remove those barriers. So the first, I'm going to talk through each one of those areas, starting with why now? And there's 2 things. There's a positive trigger to that and a painful event that might trigger it. What you kind of want to do is have from somebody senior in the business, like your CEO, who may have signed up to the valuable 500 and said, yeah, that's a great idea, and then thinks, oh, how am I going to do this? Well, if they could start a conversation saying, we decided to embark on this initiative, even though these are difficult times because ... you've got there. So it might be something like the announcement that the organization has joined the Valuable 500. It may be that they've got a diversity and inclusion strategy. It may be that you, and I'm not going to go list all of them, but it may be you've got a security ISO certification like the 27001. Great, we've done that. The next one to go for is 37001. The new financial year and 3 months before that is a crucial time. Typically, it's 3 months before the financial year that somebody's thinking about what are our budgets next year. And if you can get your ideas into the budget at that point, then when the new financial year comes around, you're there, you got it. But it could be a painful event. You discover that a lawyer has written and threatened to sue. We had one client who paid off a legal suit because of their website wasn't working. And then having spent tens of thousands of pounds on that, then came back to us and said, look, this is the second time we've had a lawyer come to us. I think they know that we're ripe for legal action and we don't want to keep on paying people off. Can you actually help us solve this and get this right for all times? It may be that your competitors are bragging about how well they're doing for accessibility, and you really know that you just haven't told everybody. So it could be things like that. So maybe it's worth just thinking in your mind, is there something's happening in our organization that can help me join this idea to that? The second element is, and I had this for when I was a partner, when I was working for a partner in one of my first consulting firms. They said, your job as a consultant is to get your client promoted. So the same attitude as an employee, what can I do to get my boss promoted? So what does this mean for their personal goals? What does it mean for the corporate goals? How can they be seen to be a good citizen? But it also might be a little bit more personal. How can they be the spearhead that gets recognition or gaining an award? So there's a number of awards out there. If you can help your boss or your colleagues stand up on stage and take the glory of winning an award, that may mean they're more likely to support you. But it could also be some reducing risks or public relations. And maybe they work with a key stakeholder or customer or other organization where you want to have the stories of customer success. So if you're in the government sector, asking the question, why are we missing so many citizens? Because we haven't thought about this. Our mission is to include citizens, and we've missed out 20%, 30% of our population because we haven't made the website very well. The RNIB is doing some really good promotion at the moment, saying it's not because I've got a disability I can't do things, it's because the website doesn't allow me to. So, it could be you play on that to talk to your boss. And then thinking about the people around you. And I think there's 4 types. There's doers. So if you are a designer or a developer, you're probably in that doing thing. You need to get training for your job. You need to have the tools to make your job work well. You need to have things that just make it simpler to do the right thing. You might have some influencers around you, particularly in HR, diversity and inclusion specialists, but also you might have other leads across the building and the business. And then if you want to get things done properly, somebody has to hold budget. So it's worth knowing who's the right level. So somebody who's maybe a product manager can only control what's happening in their product. So if you look at the IT director, the CTO, CIO, they might have more budget and it might care for them. So with one organization, it's the internal IT director who's really passionate about this. For another organization, it's the marketing director. They know they're missing potential customers or missing potential contacts if they're not covering this. And then finally, of course, right at the top of the C-suite. And depending where you are in your organization, you may feel that's just too far away. Although you could be naughty and go directly there. I was working for an engineering firm at the start of my career, and I was a bit naughty because I wrote to the head of strategy saying, there's great ideas in the shop floor and the factories. What about listening to them and turning them into new product ideas? That annoyed people around me because I'd gone over their heads, but I think that was helpful for the strategist to realize that there was a lot of ideas in the business that just wasn't percolating to the top. So there may be forums, there may be ways that you can have that conversation. And in building your vision, a good part is, where are we now? So our free scorecard is a great way of doing that. Doing an audit, the results of an audit is also a good way of getting that feeling of, are we succeeding or not? What we find is we run these things called live audits, where we get one of our team to spend a couple of hours with the development team and other people and talk about the customer journey live with that group in the room. And that's different from producing an audit report, which can easily be left on a shelf. A live audit means you can bring a stakeholder in and they have the aha moment. And we've done that with user testing, where you bring a senior leader in and they watch what's happening, and then it makes sense. Now I understand. So there's ways you can trigger us, like, where are we now? Where are the gaps? And then taking 2 mindsets. One of them is that benefits workshop. Why is this worth doing for our organization? And the benefits can be different from different organizations. And then what does it take to get there? And your starting point might be, guys, we need to do an audit. Or it might be, we need to have an external benchmark, get somebody in to help us think that. Or let's go and do the scorecard together. And the first part is just to see where our gaps are. Or it could be, I have a vision for us to get to the ISO. And so you can have this big, audacious goal to get there. Whatever the case is, this affects many people, but it also means you have the chance of thinking about many people who can support you. So people who run events in marketing or other places, how do people register for it? If it's an online event, is it accessible? We've got Patricia who's doing live captioning, and the reason we're doing live captioning is we talk a lot of jargon, and therefore she's got to determine what that is. Automated captioning may not work because of the jargon you use. Product managers, they can put it into the backlog and they can make it work. And we've worked with one organization where we noticed that the developers don't understand this. So every time there's a new change to a website or a new change to the tool, we have to re-educate them about accessibility. So think about the triggers, think about who could be on your side. The next challenge is budget. And what we hear from people is, I'm not sure I can do that because I don't hold the budget, or when we don't spend it, or I'm not sure. And in essence, all the questions you ask, what are we going to do? Why do we need budget? When do you ask for it? Who do you ask for? Comes to, we need a plan. And on our website, we've got a couple of resources for you to start thinking about a plan. And I wonder if, Jonathan, you could put the links to that into the chat, because I can't actually see the chat at the moment. But you might have a classic journey. We've got one product, we are rolling it out, and things we might want to do include knowing the benefits of accessibility for our product, seeing where the gaps are, prioritizing that work, making sure the product team are all trained up and competent and capable. It's unfair asking them to get accessibility right if they don't know how to do so. And make sure you've got an accessibility statement. That could be one path you're looking at. I just want to get this product done. Another one is going for the ISO ready. The ISO gives you an international standard. If you're a multinational organization, so we got people from Copenhagen, the Netherlands, the States, and Canada, the ISO is global. It was developed with some thinking out of the UK and then working across the planet to get acceptance in other places. So it is a good standard for if you're a multinational, because you can then say, we'll work to this, and we know there's some local issues and local laws to be put in place. Again, this is on our website, and hopefully somebody can throw a link in there if you want to go and grab that and see what you're up to.
Doing it now, Pete.
Thank you. So, one, you need a plan. Second thing is, why do you need a budget? Well, I think without asking for proper investment, it'll end up being on a shoestring. You won't get cultural change. It will be kind of little fixes. And what we see with big organizations is you're always recruiting, you're always promoting. So it can't be a one-time thing done. I think we had one person who came back and said, well, this is very 2008. We did this in 2008. Yes. And 10 years later, you're almost starting from scratch again because everyone's moved on. When to ask for it, think about 3 to 4 months before the end of the financial year. Or if you're kicking off a program, project, or project budget, make sure you put it in there. I think there's somebody who put a question in the chat about that. If you can align digital accessibility with the concept of doing a proper project, like a proper project includes somebody who does project management. A proper project includes thinking about security. A proper project thinks about customer data. A proper project thinks about digital accessibility. And you need to put a percentage of that budget towards each one of those. That helps you get there. I'm going to move down to a little bit about how you ask. So, as I've just said, giving somebody an anchor of that cost, percentage of the technology budget, the cost of litigation, helps them understand what that cost is. Because £1,000, £5,000, £500,000 means nothing unless you can work out what that's against, because it all feels like a lot of money until you realize, well, actually, it's 1% of our technology budget. It's not huge. And then how do we present it? We need to think about the ways people receive that information: numbers, words, pictures, and stories, and particularly stories. So I'm not going to go into heavy depth about how do you present that. This is going to be on HiHub. We're going to share some of the data, some of the slides from this on HiHub in the next month, and I'll put in the buy-in toolkit a little bit more about how you think about presenting things. There's a great phrase on the left, which is think about the situation. What's the problem we're facing? The implication is we need to train everybody up, so we need a training course. Situation is ... So that situation, problem, implication, need is a great way of describing how to get support for digital accessibility in 4 sentences, or it could be a 1 page, or it could be a whole presentation. So that's giving you some ideas about when to present it, think about a plan, think about how to present it. I'd be interested to hear from you guys with another Slido, and I'm going to pass back to Jonathan.
Yeah.
Tell us what you've seen as people's reaction to digital accessibility.
Yeah, it's really the objections. So as I say, we've all sort of had these. So really interested if you can go to slido.com, put in 30072 into that box, and then so into the box here, and these will start coming up because these are some of the kind of key things. So it's too difficult. We can't do it. It's the wrong time. Why spend so much for so few people? Hopefully we've given you, if you like, ammunition on that one already. This is potentially 4 out of 10 plus of the people who may be using what you're using. So it's certainly not so few people. But so yeah, if you just pop your, you can kind of vote for those things. You can vote for multiple, and then the ones at the top of the screen, we will just sort of give you some ideas on how to kind of get past some of these. And please, as I say, feel free to put into the chat as well anything that you've done to get past these. So number one at the moment here is it's too difficult to understand. And so yeah, let's just spend a couple of moments on that. It's one of the reasons why we do these webinars. So it's too difficult to understand all of these benefits and all the buy and all of the rest of it. But you all have taken that difficulty and you've gone out there and you've tried to find somebody who can help. Training is widely available. We do huge amounts of training. It's a key thing we do as an organization. Accessibility can sometimes kind of come across to people as too difficult or too difficult to understand. Normally it's because you've given them all of WCAG. So breaking things down, for example, there are about 50 checkpoints that you will need to look at in WCAG 2.0 AA. However, if you're just looking at, say, what somebody who's doing social media needs to do, it's about 5 of those things. And it's not to do with HTML, it's all to do with how you get things working on Twitter, that sort of thing. So it's actually breaking things down and saying what is the right way of getting people the right training. There is free training available out there. You can get it. We, as people who do a huge amount of this, know that a lot of the free training is where you pay nothing for it and you get not a huge amount back from it. The impact that has on organizations, in our experience, isn't great, because what you need to do is, having learned stuff, you then need to work out how to apply it. So it's not just the training course, it's actually what you do afterwards. Are you getting a kind of hint here as to why we've put the Hi Hub there? We've been putting information in people's heads for free for a while now. If you come and join on the Hi Hub, you can get access to that stuff when you need it, go back to it, keep on thinking about it, that sort of thing.
The other thing is that message, we don't have time for this. What's interesting is, it's a bit like we don't have time to change the tires on the car, but you will have all the time in the world to deal with a broken car and the lawyers and the insurance companies and things like that. And sometimes people have to be burnt and waste a fortune, really, to then spend a little bit of that to actually get it right.
Yeah.
So that's one side of it. And the second side is, if you've built it into the plan, then it's more likely to happen. What often happens, we see, is, oh my gosh, we've got to do that regulation audit afterwards. And then we've got, and I think Rich put it, the audit is being, with a big checklist of all the failures, and somebody just says, well, I've just spent all the budget on the project, I've just launched it, and now you give me a big list of problems, I can't be bothered. But if you can get that right in design right early on, if you can get it into governance very, very early on, then actually it's not going to cost so much to fix, because you've thought it through. And what's more is, we see more and more when we do live audits, is when you've understood it for one community, it actually helps everybody. Yeah. Having a site that sorts out how you do passwords helps everybody. An illustration of this was, and Jonathan kind of shared this with another group, is thinking about ATMs. You can have an ATM where somebody who's disabled comes up to the cash machine and they've got to plug in stuff and they've got to type some stuff in. Or you could give them a web app that prepares it all the way while they're in the queue for the ATM, and they press a button to verify it's them and the money comes out. That would benefit everybody, because you're not sitting there when somebody gets to the end of the queue having to do all the hard work. You can do it before you get there. So it's just thinking about these things early on, and you get the benefit later.
Absolutely. So as say, it costs too much. Well, I'll just one very quick story before that one. So one of our clients came to us last year and they said, yeah, we're being sued. We've just had one of these letters from a lawyer trying to extort £50,000 from us. So we need to get our accessibility right. And we said, sure, we'll be happy to help. And then after we've been working with them for a little bit, they kind of said, yeah, we should probably tell you the whole story, which is we paid the 50,000 2 years ago. So we got it wrong. We paid the ransom and we thought we got away with it because it would be cheaper to pay the ransom than to actually get this right. The same lawyers who we paid off 2 years ago came back this year and they brought a friend. So we now have 100,000 and it's kind of like, you've got to be joking. Actually, accessibility, getting it right could be cheaper than what we are doing. Why didn't we do this, a couple of years ago? We did a live audit with them on their site and it really changed the way they thought about things. So it's not just how to get the lawyers off our back, but it's actually how to make sure that all of the great things that come out of that live audit make our business better, not just the accessibility of the website better. So it's these sorts of things, the cost of things, it's really easy to say it costs too much, but actually a huge number of things that are really valuable don't cost very much at all, and the alternative can be much worse. So
the other thing is, for commercial organizations or even government, how much does it cost you get another 2% of your customer base? How much would you spend to do that normally? So why are you not spending that in embedding that into the product? So, somebody will say, I want to increase our customer base by 20% or 5% or 2%, whatever, and we're going to do a big marketing campaign. Or you could say, if I can make this more accessible for people, I'm actually got a better reach because we're reaching to 5, 10, 20% more than we used to. Yeah. And I certainly have several anecdotes of where family members are just, I don't want to bank with that bank anymore. It's too hard. Yeah. I had a bad experience. And that, and that's going to affect the business. So we'll talk about how do we get this done. First thing, by the fact you're on this call, you are amazing. Even if you don't feel like it, and it's Thursday, the sun's shining, it's certainly down here in London, you are amazing because you are having an impact on your organization and you are helping people beyond your organization. So you are the solution. So how do we help make that happen? Let's go to the next slide. Think about where do I start? I think the first one is to have a really clear story of the benefits for your organization. Consider the journey for the ISO as a North Star, because it gives you a place to go to. So there's a variety of tools out there which give people those pointers. Are you a good employer? Have you met some other organizations? Reference points, they're all great because that gives you a point. So the ISO might be one to go for. Think about the buy-in, get that sense of urgency with the benefits, create that guiding coalition. So align yourself with some budget holders, get some mentoring for somebody who could help you navigate how to get budget, and turn the vision into something that is not being done on a shoestring. So sometimes it's easier to get a lot of money than a little bit of money, which is counter understanding. So I was with one retailer where they spent hundreds of millions in the end to get digital right. Great. In that, you can put a reasonable budget for digital accessibility. Whereas trying to get £1,000 or £500 to do something can often be quite hard. And enable action by removing barriers, we can help you in ways along that. Things like helping you think about where to get the budget, how do you do it yourself? Align that spend against company trade, think about the plan, and sometimes just getting other people to work with you into the plan is part of getting buy-in. What would we need to do, and getting other people to tell you stuff that you might know already, but they've got involved in this and now they got skin in the game. And tell the story with words, numbers, pictures, and definitely the stories. So if you could just move across to the next slide. Our guiding principle is we believe in access for everybody. And if we can influence that in every organization, that's great. So some of the tools I'm going to share with you are free, because we want to help you with that. Share them, use them, create a movement, ask people to join these sessions. Some of them are our business services because that's our reason of being. Test them, compare them. There are other people out in the market. We would love to work with you if we're the right people. but we know there's other people out there. So in the list, I'm going to give you some ideas. There are things, and we'd love you to work with us, but we also know you may well be working with other organizations, or you want to do it yourself, and that's okay. So if you just move it across to the next slide. So things that we can help you. So here's some of the things that we can help you on that journey. We found that booking a benefits workshop with a senior team can help buy-in. They realize the benefits, and sometimes getting somebody else to come in. So Jonathan wrote the ISO. Jonathan's written 2 books. Getting somebody else in to come and work with your senior leadership team to work out the benefits for them can help you with that unlock. If you want a slightly lower cost way of doing that, we've got Inclusive Design for Organizations, Jonathan's book. You can read that, grab that. If you're on Kindle Unlimited, it's free. And that can help you give a blueprint. You can start, pass that out to other colleagues. This is what we're trying to head for. Building that buy-in. The self-assessment scorecard, which is on the web, and it's free, you can have a go and do that. What I would suggest you do is do it yourself, then take the report with somebody else and ask them what they think. And if you've got conflict, if you've got discussion, that's actually really good, because that means that we're having the discussion about this. So they go away and do the scorecard, and maybe they get a different result. But if you're continually getting the similar results, you know where you go. You've got a starting point to know where your gaps are. Invite other friends along to these sessions. That gives them an idea of what's happening. One of the things we do, we're doing that with several people, is we can come and do an external digital accessibility maturity benchmark. The advantage of getting somebody outside is it can help you get through the internal politics. It can help get several of your stakeholders involved in building your prioritized and budgeted plan based on the way that your organization works. And it can help you think about bridging the gaps in capability. We go and do a survey of your people, see where the gaps are, build consensus because people are involved in those workshops. And we run this competitive analysis. It worked really, really well with a very large bank. We're doing it with a professional services firm. They're so keen to hear what other people are doing, both for what they're doing well, and for this particular case, one of their competitors is shouting how well they are, and the market is thinking that's great, and they know they're doing even better than that. A really, really simple, low cost way is to start and do a live audit of one of your sites and just bring people in the room together and see what's happening. And we're here to chat to you. You can give us a call, you can get in touch, we can talk through. And if we're the right people to help with you, that's great. But if you just want to spend half an hour with us and talk through what you're trying to do, and we can help you influence your organization, then that's also great. So let's just move on to the next slide. All of this really is sort of, we believe the ISO is a great way of getting businesses to embed this underneath the organization and throughout the organization, in your policies and your procedures and your governance. We see that standards like WCAG are very helpful in testing the end product, and they both work hand in hand. And so wherever you are in that journey, kind of knowing where you are and having a clear plan is quite important. Jonathan, is there anything you would like to add to this?
No, I've been answering questions from people on the chat. So I must admit, I think the key thing about all of this really is that there seems like a lot here, and probably the best thing in most organizations is to try and work out, for you, is it most important to be looking at this, if you like, from a technical viewpoint? Is that your role? Is it your role to kind of try and get on top of WCAG and to understand things like that? Or is it a more strategic thing? Should you be spending your time saying, okay, if we want to get accessibility really firing here, what is the best thing for me to do? And how, as Pete's been saying, how do I pull together the people around me that can sort of go with me on the journey? There's been lots of questions coming through about champions. So yeah, that sort of thing.
So why don't you take us back to slide 22, Jonathan, and we'll take some questions.
Sure. 22?
Yeah, which is the one which has the 8 steps in it, the little circle.
That one.
If it's going to come on the screen. Yes. Okay. So this is quite a good tick list for yourselves to say, where am I? How am I doing in building that buy-in? But let's go to some questions. What kind of stuff is coming up in the chat?
Yeah, so I mean, some really interesting things. As I say, there's been lots and lots and lots of chats. So thank you, everybody. I'm just going to go up from where we are at the moment. People have been asking about High Hub. Yeah, so coming next month, we're betaing it at the moment. So, but if you come to this webinar next month, you'll get all of the information about it then. Verity Hislop, can accessibility and inclusion strategies be implemented effectively, incrementally, without signposting certain user groups to dead ends and false promises of services? Wow. Where do you start with that? Yes, you can do this incrementally. And in fact, you have to do this incrementally unless you are so great at getting budgets like Pete's been telling you that you've got everything there. So we have, as I say, we did for one of our organizations managed to get them to double their budget overnight. And then they wanted the whole plan. So we had to kind of say, you should be doing this and this and this and this. But even then, an organization needs to work out what's the next step, what are the priorities for these things. So in the same way that the best way of improving a product's accessibility, if you have an audit result come back, is to work out what priority do we fix things in. It's the same for an organization. And so don't overpromise. Don't try and boil the ocean, to use my friend Jenison Asunson's phrase, and actually work out what is going to be the thing that either is best for the organization to do next, or the thing that you can influence next. You know, get some wins under your belt, I guess, is the thing.
So there's a question in the group about we've set up some champions. Where should we start with learning? On our website, there is a document about kind of learning journeys. You know, we would love you to do that learning with us, but you can always just steal the ideas and say, okay, so this is the type of learning we need to do. There's another question similar about champions. It's like, well, how do I build my groups of champions up? And I think thinking about those different types of individuals is a good place to start thinking about champions, both, you know, product developers, people in procurement, people in HR, people across who are creating content. And part of being a champion, and we've done this with organizations, is giving them a roadmap of training over time. So they feel that they're going to go and grow as a person. I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to add a little bit more about building champions.
Actually, we've only got 1 minute left,
okay.
Pete. So what? And I've answered a number of questions sort of on the chat about it. So we've been running champions courses for organisations for years, and so if you'd like more, please after the call just get in contact with us. I just wanted to tell you what's happening next month. As I say, one of the things that's happening next month is, all things being equal, we should have High Hub there and ready to go for you to sign up immediately after the session. The session next month is to look at how this works in terms of when you are, so we've had lots of people coming to us saying they love the procurement stuff. We had a poster that went out after our session last month. It's been downloaded over 500 times. Literally, it's only been live for a week. So people are really interested in that, but it's really useful to know what people the other side of that bridge are feeling as well. So if you're creating a product, you're trying to sell it to organizations who are going to procure it from you, how do we make that work well? We're going to be telling it the story from both sides.